Worst gambling addiction scene? A man tried to hand me his wedding ring as a marker. Not metaphorically, not joking. He slid it across the felt like it was a stack of chips and said, completely serious, "It's white gold. That's at least $1,000, right?" I worked graveyard security at a riverboat casino for almost 12 years. You see weird stuff on nights, but addiction has a certain look to it. It's not loud most of the time. It's quiet. It's a person sitting too still. The ring guy wasn't even the worst. There was a woman named Carla who came in every Tuesday and Friday at exactly 6:15 p.m. She'd park in the same handicap spot, even though she wasn't disabled. She just said it was closer to luck. She played penny slots. Always the same bank of machines. Always the same seat. At first she was bubbly, brought cookies for the slot attendants, talked about her grandkids. Over the months, the cookies stopped. Then the grandkids' story stopped. Then the smiling stopped. She started bringing envelopes. Not big ones. Just those little white bank envelopes. She'd open one, feed the machine slowly, almost ceremonially. When it was gone, she'd sit there staring at the bonus like it had personally betrayed her. One night I noticed her car still in the lot at 9 a.m. when my shift ended. That wasn't normal. I went back inside. She hadn't moved. Empty coffee cups stacked beside her. No bonus hits. No big wins. Just slow erosion. I radioed a floor supervisor because something felt off. They pulled her player card history. She'd been cashing out her entire paycheck there for months. Every direct deposit. Every time. When the supervisor gently suggested she take a break, she just whispered, "If I leave now, it means I wasted it." That line stuck with me. If I leave now, it means I wasted it. As if staying longer could somehow reverse time. They eventually banned her at her daughter's request. The daughter came in crying, saying the power company had shut off Carla's electricity twice that year. I had to stand there while this grown woman screamed that we were stealing her one chance at fixing everything. But the darkest thing I ever saw didn't involve screaming. It was a guy in the high limit room. Mid-40s. Quiet. Polite. Played baccarat like it was a math exam he could eventually solve. He lost steadily for hours. Not dramatic, just steady bleeding. Around 3 a.m., after dropping what I later found out was nearly $90,000, he leaned back and said calmly, "That was my brother's surgery fund." No one reacted at first because gamblers say wild stuff when they're tilted. But he didn't say it angrily. He said it like he was reporting the weather. The dealer froze. The floor manager stepped in. They offered resources. He declined everything. Cashed out the last few thousand. Thanked us. 2 days later, corporate sent around a memo that he'd tried to dispute the withdrawals, claiming temporary insanity. It didn't work. The transaction stood. And then there was the night someone locked themselves in the bathroom and tried to flush their chips down the toilet because they couldn't trust themselves to cash out. Story 2. A guy tried to sell his car keys to another player at the table while the hand was still in play. Not to the casino, to a stranger sitting next to him. He just held them out and said, completely serious, "You can have it. I just need another buy-in." I worked overnight as a floor supervisor in a smaller regional casino for about a decade. People think the wild stories are the fights or someone smashing a machine. Honestly, the worst stuff is quieter. It creeps in slowly, and by the time you realize what you're watching, it's already gone too far. There was a regular I'll call Mark, early 60s, retired electrician. Came in wearing clean work boots and always tipped the dealers even when he lost. He mostly played low-stakes blackjack, nothing flashy. At first he treated it like entertainment. Stayed a couple hours, left when he was down. Then his visits got longer. He started showing up before my shift started and still being there when I left. Same seat, same posture, barely moving except to wait for another buy-in. He stopped talking to anyone, didn't drink, didn't celebrate wins, just played like he was trying to grind something invisible down. One night surveillance called me because he'd been at the same table for almost 16 hours straight. I went over to check on him, and his hands were shaking so badly he couldn't stack chips properly. I suggested he take a break, grab food, walk around. He said, without looking at me, "If I stop now, I have to think about it." That sentence stuck with me more than anything else I heard in that job. A few weeks later, his daughter came in looking for him. She was embarrassed, apologizing before she even spoke. Said he'd started borrowing money from family and lying about where it was going. We couldn't tell her anything because of privacy rules, but she found him anyway. I watched from a distance while she begged him to leave. He wouldn't even turn his chair around to to face her. Eventually, she just left crying. He stayed another 6 hours. The biggest single loss I ever saw wasn't dramatic either. A younger guy hit an unbelievable streak on roulette, turned a few thousand into something close to 6 figures over the course of a night. Everyone was cheering, drinks, high fives, the whole thing. When I came back the next evening, he was still there. Story 3. The craziest thing I ever saw wasn't someone losing a huge jackpot. It was watching someone slowly erase their own life while fully aware it was happening. I worked overnight security at a smaller regional casino for a few years. Not glamorous, mostly checking IDs, dealing with drunk arguments, and walking people out when they'd had too much. You get used to seeing people lose money. You stop reacting to it after a while because if you didn't, you'd never make it through a shift. But one guy stuck with me. He started coming in around midnight every Friday. Always alone, always quiet. Early 40s maybe. Clean clothes, polite, tipped the servers well. The kind of guest nobody worries about. He mostly played electronic roulette, sitting for hours barely moving except to press the same few numbers. At first it looked harmless. He'd win sometimes, lose sometimes. Normal stuff. Then over a few months, things changed. He stopped ordering food, just coffee, then eventually nothing at all. I remember one of the cocktail servers joking that he must live off caffeine and stress. He laughed, but it wasn't really a laugh, more like a reflex. One night I noticed him staring at the screen after a loss. Not betting, just staring. The machine had already reset. He didn't move for maybe 5 minutes. I asked if he was okay and he said very calmly, "I just need one good spin and everything goes back to normal." That line scared me more than yelling ever does. After that, he started coming more often. Fridays turned into Fridays and Saturdays. Then weekdays. He looked more tired every time. Same clothes showing up again and again. Beard growing out. He stopped tipping. Staff started avoiding his section because he'd get irritated if anyone talked to him while he was playing. One early morning, around 5 a.m., I saw him at the ATM trying card after card. Not aggressively, just quietly. Insert, decline, remove. Insert, decline, remove. Like he expected one of them to suddenly work if he tried enough times. Eventually, he just leaned his forehead against the machine. No anger, no swearing, just empty. A few weeks later, he disappeared. Happens all the time, so nobody thought much of it. Then a dealer mentioned seeing him outside during the day, sitting in his car for hours before the casino opened. Same car, parked in the far corner of the lot. Engine off, just waiting. The last time I saw him, he wasn't gambling at all. He walked in, did a full lap around the floor, and stood watching other people play. Not talking, not smiling, just watching. Then he left. Story 4. The moment that messed with my head the most started with a guy laughing like he'd just heard the funniest joke in the world, except nothing funny had happened. I used to work surveillance, the room upstairs where you watch everything on cameras. You see patterns up there that people on the floor don't notice. You see how long someone's really been sitting, how often they leave, how fast things change. This guy came in late afternoon, dressed like he'd come straight from work. Nice watch, pressed shirt, still had his office badge clipped to his belt. He wasn't drunk, wasn't loud, didn't look stressed, just excited. He went straight to high-limit blackjack. At first it looked like a good run. He was winning small amounts, smiling, chatting with the dealer. Normal energy. But after about an hour, something flipped. You could see it even through the cameras. He stopped reacting to wins entirely. Losses didn't make him angry either. He just started playing faster. Hands back to back. Bigger bets. No breaks. Around dinner time, he stepped away and made a long phone call in the hallway. When he came back, the bets doubled. That's usually when we start paying attention, because that's the point where people stop playing for fun and start trying to fix something. He lost hard over the next couple hours. What stuck out wasn't the money. It was how mechanical he became. No talking. No drinks. Just nodding when the dealer asked if he wanted another card. Like he wasn't really there anymore. At one point he stood up, walked to the restroom, splashed water on his face, and stared at himself in the mirror for a long time. You could see it on camera. He looked scared for maybe 10 seconds. Then he walked right back out and sat down again. By midnight he'd switched games twice, chasing losses. Roulette, then baccarat. Each time the bets got bigger, faster, more desperate. Not yelling or slamming chips, just quiet urgency. The kind where someone thinks stopping now would somehow make everything worse. Around 3 a.m. he emptied what looked like the last of his chips. He sat there for a minute, hands flat on the table, staring at nothing. Dealer called no more bets, and he didn't even look up. He just stood up and left. That should have been the end of it. People lose and leave every night. But about 20 minutes later, he came back in through the entrance, walking faster this time. Straight line, no hesitation. He bought back in again, this time with cash that looked like it had just come out of envelopes. Different banks, different bands. That's when it got dark dark for me, because by then he wasn't trying to win anymore. He was trying not to feel what had already happened. He lost the rest within an hour. No reaction, no anger, just empty. When he finally cashed out what little he had left, he asked the cashier what time the banks opened nearby. Not in a joking way, just practical, like he was planning the next step already. We never saw him again after that night. Story 5, the worst one I ever saw, started with everyone cheering and ended with a grown man asking security if we could let him sit inside a little longer because he didn't want to go home yet. I used to deal poker in a casino that stayed busy almost 24/7. Poker's different from table games. People convince themselves they're in control because it's skill, not luck. That makes the crashes hit differently. This guy came in late on a Saturday night. Early 30s, loud in a friendly way, buying drinks for the table. He bought in for a modest amount, nothing unusual, and within the first hour, he just couldn't lose. Every bluff worked, every draw hit. The whole table was joking that he had some kind of supernatural luck. Stacks kept building in front of him. Chips everywhere. People swapping out just to take a shot at him because he was running so hot. You could see it change him in real time. At first he was laughing, then he got focused, then he got possessive. He started stacking chips over and over again like he needed to feel how much was there. When someone suggested he lock up a win and cash out, he laughed and said, "Why would I stop now?" That's usually the moment dealers look at each other without saying anything. A few hours later, the energy shifted. New players sat down, quieter ones. The cards stopped falling his way. He lost a big pot, shrugged it off. Lost another, got quieter. Then another. The stack started shrinking fast. Instead of slowing down, he started chasing. Bigger raises. Calling hands he would have folded earlier. Playing every pot like he was trying to rewind time. The crowd disappeared once the winning stopped. It always does. By early morning, the huge pile in front of him was gone. Then his original buy-in was gone too. He kept reaching into his wallet, pulling out cash in smaller and smaller amounts. The confidence was gone, replaced by this tight, desperate smile like he was trying to convince himself he was still in control. At one point he stood up, paced behind his chair, and said out loud, "I was up so much. I just need to get back there." Nobody answered. The last hand he played, he shoved everything in with a hand that didn't make sense. When he lost, he just stared at the table for a long time. Not angry, just stunned. He didn't leave right away. He sat there while the next hand was dealt, even though he had nothing left in front of him. Eventually the floor told him he had to give up the seat. That's when he asked if he could just sit nearby for a while, because he didn't trust himself to drive yet. Said he felt sick. Security brought him water and let him sit in the lounge until sunrise. Story 6. I once watched an entire family celebrate their matriarch by quietly draining her back down to earth. I worked in VIP guest relations at a resort casino in my mid-20s. My job wasn't dealing cards. It was maintaining relationships with ultra-high-tier players. Birthdays, private dinners, show tickets, transportation, just checking in calls. You learn quickly that loyalty in that world isn't about friendship. It's about math. There was an older woman, late 60s, maybe early 70s, who had been coming for years before I started. Always immaculate, polite, played high-stakes slots and some baccarat. She wasn't reckless. She was disciplined in her own way. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure to like the video and subscribe. She'd set limits, hit a number, and leave. Staff respected her. Then one winter night, she hit something enormous. Not a standard jackpot, the kind that makes surveillance double-check and marketing scramble. Life-altering money. She handled it calmly. No screaming, no champagne theatrics, just a small smile. She did the paperwork, thanked everyone, and said something I'd never heard a high-tier player say before: "I think I'm done now." And she meant it. She stopped answering promotional calls, turned down every event invite. When I did reach her once just to congratulate her again months later, she said she was traveling, spending time with grandchildren, finally relaxing. She sounded lighter. That should have been the end of her story. But casinos are patient. About a year later, leadership decided to reconnect. Not aggressively, strategically. A luxury birthday retreat offer, private villa, spa packages, fine dining credits, flights covered, and not just for her, for everyone. Children, in-laws, adult grandchildren, anyone of legal age, 15+ people. She agreed with one clear condition: she wasn't gambling. And she didn't. The first night, she stayed in her suite while the family explored. By the second night, a few of them were on the gaming floor, just for fun. By the third, hosts were arranging private tables and slot credit incentives. Not for her, but for them. You could feel the shift. At dinner one evening, I stopped by their private room to check on things. The matriarch looked tired, not upset, just distant. The rest of the table was animated, talking about near misses, how how close they'd been to big wins, how exciting it all was. I remember one of her sons joking, "We'll win it back tomorrow." She didn't laugh. By the end of the week, the family's combined losses were staggering. Not theoretical, not points-based, real money, wire transfers, liquidated accounts, advances arranged through personal bankers. She never touched a machine. The night before checkout, I saw her alone in the lobby around 2 a.m. No entourage, no security, just sitting there, staring at the chandelier like she was calculating something invisible. She asked me a question I wasn't trained to answer. "Do you ever feel like a place waits for you?" I didn't know what to say. Story 7. The most unsettling thing I ever saw was a man celebrating like he'd just fixed his entire life, and by sunrise he looked like he didn't know how he was going to keep living it. I worked late-night floor service in a casino when I was younger. My job was mostly running drinks and food orders, so you end up orbiting the same players for hours. You notice moods changing before anyone else does. One night there was this guy at a craps table who suddenly caught fire. Every roll went his way. The table energy flipped from normal chatter to full-on chaos. People yelling, high-fiving strangers, dealers trying to keep up with stacks growing faster than they could color up chips. He wasn't obnoxious about it either, just genuinely happy. Tipped everyone, thanked the dealers, kept saying he'd never had luck like that before. At one point he joked that this was going to reset his whole year. Eventually he colored up a massive pile and walked away while everyone was still cheering. I remember thinking that was the smartest thing I'd ever seen someone do. Win big and actually leave. A few hours later, during my break, I went outside to the staff smoking area behind the building. It was quiet except for the hum of the air units. He was sitting on the curb by himself, still in the same clothes, staring at the ground. At first I didn't recognize him because the energy was completely gone. He looked smaller somehow. He asked if I had a lighter. When I handed it to him, I realized he'd been crying. Not loud, just silent tears, like he'd run out of energy to react properly. He started talking without me asking. Said after cashing out he went upstairs to celebrate, had a few drinks, ran into people telling him he was on a streak, came back down just to play a little more before leaving, then a little more again, and again. He kept saying, I was already up, so it didn't feel real when it started disappearing. By the time it felt real, he was chasing the feeling of being ahead instead of the money itself. He didn't even remember half the bets he'd made, just flashes of losing, going back for more chips, convincing himself it would turn around because it had earlier. Story 8. I live in Australia, which most people don't realize has one of the highest gambling losses per capita in the world. Anywhere over 18 can gamble, legally, in pubs, bars, and clubs. It's normal. It's socially accepted. That normalcy makes it far darker than any high-energy casino in Vegas. There's no excitement, no cheering, no friends celebrating a trip, just people staring at blinking machines like zombies. I used to work security and VIP liaison at a few of these venues. You see everything when your job is watching floors full of people trapped in glass and light cages. There was this guy, mid-30s, dressed in a work shirt and slacks, who came in every Friday. He was quiet, polite, and never tipped anyone. That's how you know someone's serious. One night, he came in looking especially tense. He sat at a cluster of high-limit pokies and started feeding them with small notes from his wallet. Within 20 minutes, he'd blown through an entire fortnight's paycheck. Not just any paycheck. I knew the numbers because he'd bragged at a previous visit. Instead of stopping, he reached for his phone, called his partner to ask if he could borrow more money, and then pulled out a payday loan from his bank app. Ridiculous interest rates, the kind that make people win money only to owe double a week later. He played with mechanical precision, not emotion. One machine after another. It was hypnotic. Other patrons glanced at him, but nobody said anything. After a while, he started mumbling to himself, not in panic, just a quiet litany of numbers. I need 300 back, 500 back, everything back. He didn't look at the screen. He didn't even touch the buttons sometimes. He just let the lights and bells wash over him while he tried to convince himself he could erase the losses if he just played smart. By closing time, he had emptied 3 separate accounts, gone through cash he had in his wallet, and maxed a loan on his credit card. I had to stop him from leaving once because he had no money for a taxi and was insisting he could gamble his way home. He looked like a man who had stopped being able to feel reality. Story 9. I worked in a pub casino hybrid for a few years, mostly on the floor serving drinks and keeping an eye on high-risk machines. Everyone talks about pokies like they're harmless fun, but the combo of alcohol and constant flashing lights is way darker than most people realize. There was this regular mid-40s, quiet guy, always seemed friendly enough when he wasn't staring at the machines. Came in after work almost every day, sat at the same 2 machines in the corner, nursing beers while feeding coins over and over. At first, it looked harmless. A few hundred here, a few hundred there. But over weeks, the pattern got ugly. He started skipping lunches, ignored calls from friends and family. Sometimes he'd leave his wallet on the table while he went to the bathroom because he didn't even trust himself to step away from the machine. I noticed one afternoon he pulled out a notebook, writing numbers down obsessively, not tracking wins, but how much he needed to recover, how much he'd spend each day. One night, the staff realized something was very wrong. He had maxed out 2 cards, drained 3 cash advances, and was trying to borrow money from another patron. He kept muttering, "Just one more spin. I can get it back. I can fix it." By closing, he was pale, shaking, clutching the machine like it had betrayed him personally. The next day, a coworker told me he'd missed work for the first time in months. He hadn't eaten properly. He didn't answer calls. You could see it in his eyes, the kind of empty look where someone is still physically there but emotionally gone. It wasn't a single $10,000 loss that did it. It was 6 months of tiny, daily self-betrayals, the kind nobody notices at first, until one day you realize the person you knew has vanished under fluorescent lights and the mechanical chimes of slot machines. Story 10. I worked security and guest services at a casino in the US for a few years, and I've seen my fair share of people make terrible decisions, but this one takes the cake. There was a young man, early 30s, clean cut, looked like he had his life together, checking in for a weekend stay with a group of friends. He had maybe $2,000 cash on him, enough for his room share, drinks, meals, and some gambling. Nothing extravagant. Before anyone even got their keys, he walked past the roulette tables on the way in and apparently felt lucky. The next thing the front desk heard was him asking if they could cover his weekend because he just lost all his money on Red. 3 hours from home. Gone. Every dollar. The staff and his friends were stunned. The friends who knew him already recognized the pattern. This wasn't a one-off. It was a habit that had destroyed relationships before. They told him he could have a bed and some basic food, but absolutely no gambling money. No booze. Nothing. He didn't take it well. He called his dad and demanded he drive all the way to Atlantic City to rescue him. The entitlement, the panic, the sheer detachment from reality. It was shocking. He had turned a few hours in a casino into a total collapse of responsibility, expecting other people to bail him out in real time. What made it darker wasn't just the money. It was the calm certainty he had the universe owed him a win. The way he walked away from friends and plans and expected adults to fix it. Watching someone repeatedly crash themselves like that, rational one moment, desperate and almost feral the next, is the closest thing I've seen to a person unravel in fast motion. I've seen people lose hundreds of thousands, seen marriages ruined, watched families argue over stolen inheritance money. But watching someone destroy a weekend, beg for rescue, and act like it was normal, that's the kind of loss that sticks with you. Story 11. I'm not a casino worker myself, but I was working nights for a local emergency response team when we got a call from casino security. They had a guest who had lost an extreme amount at the tables and were genuinely concerned for her safety. Security reported she had made a comment about ending her life if she couldn't recover from the losses. When we arrived at her apartment, she was sitting in near darkness, completely silent for a few moments before she even acknowledged us. Her hands shook, and you could see the shame in her eyes before she even spoke. Eventually, she admitted she had a serious gambling problem. This wasn't the first time she'd lost everything she had. She had drained savings, borrowed money she couldn't pay back, and felt like she had nowhere to turn. The situation was terrifying. You could see how quickly gambling addiction can spiral into total despair, where the loss of money becomes the loss of hope itself. She agreed to go with us to the hospital, where a social worker was able to connect her with therapy and resources to start rebuilding. Story 12. I'm not a casino worker, but I played poker professionally for a while. One guy would come to our small home games, lose a few buy-ins each night, and nobody worried. He had a good job, a stable life. It didn't seem like a problem. Then things got strange. He started playing online table games on his phone while sitting at our table. Blackjack, roulette, small stakes at first, but the numbers got bigger faster. Soon he was showing us hands where he was losing or winning more in a single hand online than the entire poker night combined. We started to notice the change. Distracted, anxious, secretive. One night, he slipped up and admitted the truth. He had cashed out all his retirement accounts, emptied joint bank accounts, and hidden it from his wife. It wasn't a small loss. High 6 figures gone in a matter of months, all on impulse and chasing wins. The fallout was immediate. His wife left him, he stopped coming to the games, and no one really knew where he went after that. It was the first time I'd seen someone's entire life unravel because of gambling, and it felt predatory, almost mechanical, like the addiction had taken over entirely. After that, I couldn't enjoy poker the same way. Winning felt hollow. I realized gambling isn't just numbers or skill. It's a sickness that can quietly devour overpower everything someone has, including relationships, careers, and even their sense of self. Story 13. I don't work in a casino, but my parents are both full-blown gambaholics. They've spent more money than most people will ever make, and they're so large and unhealthy now that they can't even step foot in a casino anymore. Yet somehow they've found a new outlet, watching other people play slot machines on YouTube. All day, every day. It's grotesque and darkly sad. They'll cheer, jump in their chairs, get that dopamine rush from someone else hitting a bonus or lining up 3 identical symbols. No awareness of family, no meaningful relationships, nothing except the fleeting joy of someone else's luck. Watching them, you realize that gambling addiction doesn't just ruin finances, it can completely hollow a person out. Story 14. I live in Nevada, so casinos and slot machines are everywhere, impossible to avoid. I was walking to a restaurant inside a local casino when I saw him, a man, mid-30s maybe, completely broken, sitting at a row of slot machines. At first, I thought he was frustrated like any gambler might get after a losing streak. Then I realized he was wailing, pounding on the machine, screaming a woman's name over and over. Full-on crying, body shaking, head hitting the floor. People were staring. The air felt heavy. Security had to drag him out, and even then, he was screaming and kicking the glass doors, begging the machines to give him back his money. It wasn't funny. It wasn't entertaining. It was horrifying. The desperation, the raw panic of someone who had lost everything he could, and maybe even more he couldn't afford. It was a darkness that hits like a punch in the gut. I lost my appetite and left shortly afterward. Story 15. I worked in a casino for nearly a decade, and you get used to huge sums changing hands. You quickly realize that loss is relative. I once dealt to a wealthy Chinese player who lost $12 million, barely a dent in his account. A lady might lose $1,000, her entire savings, and shrug like it's nothing. But there are always a few cases that stick. One night, a man was on a tear at the tables, winning roughly $9 million. I finished my shift, went home, thinking he was riding his lucky streak. When I came back the next day, it had vanished. Not just that, he'd lost an additional $15 million and was in the middle of transferring more funds. I had been his lucky dealer, the one he kept insisting brought him fortune. That night, I was no longer lucky. The man was pale, silent, tense, and staring at the table like he had been stripped of something far more than money. You could see it in his eyes, the calculation, the panic, the hollow desperation. Story 16. I was working security at an Indian casino in Oklahoma while I was in the Army Reserves. We had a paycheck cashing teller that didn't charge fees, and people would come in to cash their paychecks for convenience. One night, I watched a man walk in, cash his entire paycheck, and put every single dollar into a high-stakes slot machine. He spun it a couple of times, lost it all, and walked out. About 5 minutes later, someone ran in screaming that a gun had been fired outside. We rushed out with tribal police to find the man had shot himself. It was horrifying and surreal. Later, we found out he had a wife and 2 small children. He was deep in debt, convinced that this one night at the casino could fix everything. In his mind, losing that paycheck meant he couldn't go home, couldn't face his family, and in the end, he saw only one way out. Story 17. I'm not a casino worker myself, but a friend of mine dealt cards for years in Tunica. He told me this story about a man at his table that stuck with him. The guy came in at the start of my friend's shift and sat down, barely moving, playing hand after hand. My friend would chat with players like normal, but this man didn't respond much. Around 8:30 p.m., he mentioned he needed to pick up his kid. My friend, trying to be helpful, reminded him as the clock ticked closer. The man would just say things like, "Yeah, it's close by," or "just after I win a hand." 8:30 came, 8:45 came, 9 p.m. came, the shift ended, and the man was still there. My friend left, tips in hand, thinking the guy would leave on his own. Here's the insane part. The next morning, the man was still there, in the same clothes, at the same table. My friend almost lost it. He needed his paycheck, so he just sat down and worked like nothing was wrong, but the image of that man frozen in the casino lights haunted him. My friend never knew how it ended. He never saw the man leave or if he ever went home. Was the family real? Did they even know where he was? Did he lose more than money? Maybe years of life spent in that chair chasing luck? Story 18. I had a friend, let's call him. We grew up together, inseparable in school, video games, movies, sleepovers, everything. He was the one person I could call my best friend. But M had a rough home life, a heavy-handed father, a mother who didn't care, and he never really talked about it. After college, we stayed in touch, messaging each other weekly. One week, I didn't hear back. A full week of silence. I sent message after message, nothing. I decided to check on him in person. His sister answered the door and led me inside. What I learned was chilling. M had been spending nights at pubs to escape, and there he got hooked on gambling. Small bets at first, then bigger, until he was overdrafting multiple bank accounts, borrowing money, and spiraling out of control. College dropped to the wayside. Eventually, his debts caused a massive fight with his parents. He packed up his belongings and left. No one has heard from him since. Not a post online, not a message. Just gone. Story 19. I remember two brothers coming into my roulette table for the first time. The older, shorter brother was sharp, calculated, and clearly in control. The younger one, well, he was the kind of guy who lit up a room. Friendly, goofy, happy. Everyone at the table adored him immediately. At first, they were just winning together. The older brother taught him the game, and it was cute, almost wholesome. But then something dark happened. That younger brother started to crave the high from winning, and the attention it brought him. What had been a shared experience became a personal obsession. It started small. He'd come by once a week, then twice. Eventually, he was there every single day, chasing that dopamine rush. That kind, cheerful face slowly twisted. Sour, irritable, desperate. I could see the change in his eyes. The joy was gone, replaced by obsession. And here's the worst part. He wasn't playing with his own money. He was spending his family's business funds, chasing the memory of that first high he had with his brother. The same people who had nurtured him, supported him, trusted him, all evaporating in the glow of a roulette wheel. Story 20. She was an older Hispanic woman who only spoke Spanish, so I was called to assist her. She wanted to self-ban from the casino. As we went through the process, she told me about years of begging from her family, pleading with her to stop gambling. She had always insisted she didn't have a problem, that she would stop when she wanted to. But the damage was done. She had gambled away her own money and much of her family's savings. Eventually, her family cut off all contact with her, and still, she chased the compulsion. It wasn't until years later, after losing nearly everything that mattered, that she decided to stop herself. Story 21. His business wasn't profitable, mostly because he spent all his time at the casino. He had hidden debts from his wife and thought the insurance payout would cover everything. So one night, he set fire to the building, then drove straight to the casino, still buzzing from the fire he'd started. What he didn't realize was how small the world had become. Neighbors had security cameras. His car had GPS. The jacket he wore was later found with smoke residue that matched the accelerant. A gas station captured him filling the car on the way, and the casino recorded him entering in the same clothes he'd set the fire in. The story doesn't end with a lucky escape. He got caught, charged with federal mail fraud for trying to collect the insurance, and now lives in substandard federal housing, a shell of the man who once tried to cheat the world to feed his addiction. Story 22. I worked for nearly 13 years as a shift manager. I was called to the front entrance to help a woman who was sobbing uncontrollably, shaking, utterly terrified. When I got to her, she told me what had happened. She had spent her entire paycheck. But it didn't stop there. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure to like the video and subscribe. In a desperate attempt to chase losses, she had emptied her entire bank account, which also contained her husband's paycheck. She was crying because she was scared to go home, terrified of what her husband might do when he realized everything was gone. The panic, the shame, the absolute hopelessness in her voice. It was something I'll never forget. Story 23. I'm in the Netherlands, and officially you're only supposed to gamble in the state casino. But there's this chain Jack's Casino that's just slot machines and automated roulette tables. From what I could tell, it mostly catered to people who were no longer welcome anywhere else because of their addiction. I used to go there as a student because they offered free food and drinks for guests. I'd put in €2 in the roulette machine. Even if I lost, I got a full 3-course lunch, drinks, coffee, all essentially paid for by the person on the other side of the machine. These weren't casual players. Most of them were clearly dependent, often playing with €1,000 or more at a time, money they probably couldn't afford to lose. What haunted me the most were the people running from table to table, trying to play everything at once, their hands shaking, eyes darting, muttering under their breath. They weren't having fun. They were stressed, desperate, like predators hunting a prey they'd already killed. The dopamine had left them long ago, but they kept chasing it, empty shells of human beings, feeding machines that didn't care about them. Story 24. I was off the strip with a friend, checking out a local casino about a 15-minute drive away. The place was huge and mostly empty late afternoon. We sat down at a blackjack table with only one other local player. multiplayer. After about half an hour, we cashed out our tiny winnings and turned to leave. That's when I saw it, a line of at least 100 people stretching to the cashier, all waiting to cash in their work checks. The dealer explained the casino was running a promotion. If you cashed your paycheck there, you got a bonus. What hit me was the type of people in that line. These weren't tourists or wealthy players. These were people already barely scraping by, lining up to gamble away their rent money, their groceries, their only paycheck for a small chance at something extra. Many probably didn't even have savings. Direct deposit had bypassed them. All they had was their labor, their paycheck, and the illusion that a machine or a table could make it all better. Story 25. Back in the mid-1990s, Indian casinos were just starting to pop up. Most locals didn't know the rules. They were like babes in the woods. One weekend, some flashy redneck hotshot rolled in with his wife and a gaggle of friends in a big pickup. They hit the tables, won a few grand on newbie blackjack, and spent thousands on booze and food. The casino didn't care. It was free money to them. Next weekend, same group came back, wasted, drunk, and blowing through $25,000 between them. They eventually disappeared, probably having learned a brutal lesson. Except the wife. She stuck around. At first, she was just sloppy, losing small amounts at blackjack. But over time, it escalated. Her rings disappeared, then her earrings, her necklaces, even her wedding band. She pawned everything in a desperate attempt to chase some imagined lucky streak. The cards and the machines never cared. They just took everything. 2 weeks later, she lost again, tried to pull more cash from the ATM, and it seized her card. She collapsed in the middle of the lobby, screaming and sobbing. She had pawned all her jewelry, destroyed her marriage, maxed out every credit card, and was completely bankrupt. Security dragged her outside, where tribal police were waiting, because she had tried to start her car while wasted. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely want to check out What's the Worst Thing an Employee Did to Get Fired. Click here to watch it now.